so then I was questioning the fact that I ever did the channel at all, and everything I've done over the last 4 years, like with that thing specifically. And like, should I have ever done it? Should I like delete all this stuff? Is it worth it?
These are the times we will all remember. Were you there? What did you do? So what do you say? We need to clean this place up?
Thy kingdom come.
Think celestial, making the celestial kingdom your eternal goal.
Listen to me now. Listen to me now.
And he is not permitted to evaluate
innuendo, half-truths, and lies.
Go to some weak-sauce, liberal, Democrat, baby-butchering church, but do not come back to this one ever again until you repent.
Doubt is a tool of the devil designed to weaken us.
Repent! Repent! Repent!
You are listening to The New Heretics. Shame on you.
I know that Bart Ehrman, for like a hot second, was kind of enjoyed by Jehovah's Witnesses because he said, like on a blog one time, that he thought that their rendering of John 1:1 was acceptable. Mm. And JWs were like, "Oh, we got one. This is proof." Yeah. And you know, no, I remember actually being a little bit triggered. Whatever the book he released, kind of in my early time doing the channel, he released a book I think just called like Heaven and Hell, and it was about the way that the Christian doctrines regarding heaven and hell evolved. And it's kind of, I found it almost a little bit triggering because a lot of his points on the way that like the Trinity doctrine evolved, you know, are things that I would hear as a witness. And so you're kind of like, well, wait a minute, what the right? And it's like, just because
did witnesses actually have the truth?
They're occasionally going to throw in accurate information into their life. It doesn't mean that Stephen Lett is a person who needs to be listened to with seriousness.
Even if he had the truth, I don't think.
Right, yeah. I mean, there's like several steps down the line before you have to accept anything Stephen Lett says.
Yeah, there's a distinction between like you could say like the accuracy behind the theology and then like the nominal implication, like their nominal authority, right? Like whether or not I ought to listen to this individual. That's a different case. Unless you're making the direct connection that the theology grants them the nominal authority of like, I should listen to these people, which like you can refute that.
Right. Like when they're speaking ex Bethel as a body or whatever, then it's like official, like the Pope official doctrine or whatever. But as individuals, we can kind of take what they say with a grain of salt a little bit. Yeah. Even though functionally that's not really how it is for JWs.
I like when they were like 7 of them at one point.
Yeah.
Because then you could directly connect it to the beast, you know, the beast that comes out of the waters.
That's always good.
But now you can't do that with the 9s. It's not
That's true. Do you think they ever calculate that in their heads? Like, oh, well, you know what the apostates are going to say if we've got 9 governing, or if we got 7, we can't do that. Let's at least try and have 9. That's not a Bible number that comes up hardly at all.
I think they do think about what kind of numbers and like the symbology behind it, because they definitely can't have 6, right? Because that would imply like an imperfection and like the overactive mind of like even an average JW would be like, oh, something's wrong, right?
Mm-hmm. I noticed an interesting thing.
That's human imperfection.
Yeah, I noticed this thing that they do. David Splain, I feel like, brought this up a couple times. It was weird. I feel like it was towards the end of COVID. In a few talks, it was like he was a stand-up kind of trying out new material. He wasn't quite sure if it was going to make it into his main act, but he brought up a few different instances in which like there were 144,000 baptisms in a year, that can't be a coincidence. Or like bringing up the 144,000 in different contexts as if that like was proof of a thing. And it felt very like QAnon Q drop post, like, and he tweeted at 7:12 p.m. and 12 was one of the numbers in the post. So like it was starting to feel like that.
Yeah, I feel like I heard one time that there was like 144,000 lights in this like chandelier at what is it? The at the Jersey Assembly Hall or something like that.
Patterson? Oh yes, at the New Jersey Assembly Hall.
Yeah, I can't remember. It was one of them.
And then they moved that to Patterson. I think when I was there, they had this chandelier there, and were like restoring it. Maybe like they had purchased it from the Stanley Theater. Or whatever, or did they purchase the Stanley Theater? There was some.
They purchased the Stanley Theater and like remodeled it, but so it might have been in the Stanley Theater, or it might have been. I don't remember.
You're right. There was something about there being 144,000 lights on the thing. That's amazing.
The light gets brighter.
The light gets brighter.
Yeah, it's on a dimmer switch.
Do you think they have a doomsday clock, but it's like a Armageddon light dimmer in the governing body office where it's like, all right, we're 5 seconds to 70 watts, which is the full number we've got going on here.
I think
we're a fraction of a second.
I think they must have something like that in the writing department, because what was it? 2014 they did that whole like kingdom ministry. That was like, it's 100 years since 19.
Oh yeah, that's one of my favorite things to. I need to make a conscious effort to do so many things in life. It's once you start like doing like little projects, don't you feel like you have like 9 million more ideas? Like, well, we need to do a show on that too. I feel like it's a very under discussed thing that. There was a real sense in 2014 that something really significant was going to happen because it had been 100 years since 1914. Like they said this outright to us, like behind the scenes, doing stuff at the convention and stuff. And, nothing at all happened other than they did 1 year where they had bigger conventions than usual.
So did you ever hear this? It might have been kind of related to this, but I remember vividly, I was pretty young at the time, but I remember, I was probably a teenager. I remember hearing from a guy who returned from Bethel. He was a pretty prominent elder in our area, and he had spent a couple years at Bethel. And when he came back, he was like telling everybody in service and stuff about this thing he picked up, which was that the reason 1975 was wrong was because it didn't take into account Eve's creation. So if you figure out how old Eve was, or how old Adam was when Eve was created, then you could actually pinpoint the date. And so the theory that they were floating around at the time, yeah, right. So then the next layer of the schizo here, the schizo connection was that typically in Jewish custom or whatever, the men married at 30, so you could tack on 30 to 1975, and that would get you to the end coming in 2005,
which would be the bridegroom.
Right here, yeah, right.
Wow, that's brilliant. I love that.
So they were still trying to make 1975 be right somehow.
I'm
assuming this guy picked it up from somebody like relatively in the know in Bethel. I don't think he would have just like invented that.
I heard when I was did like a little bit of work at Warwick, there was a couple people that I had heard this rumor from, that I have heard other XJWs like heard through the rumor mill, that the governing body had bought up a bunch of like whatever kind of internet cables that travel like very long distances, and they had bought these cables that ran under the ocean, and they did this so that in the first day in paradise after Armageddon, we would have morning worship broadcast to all witnesses all over the world.
I had heard of that. Not that particular thing, but I had heard somebody say that in paradise we would have Wi-Fi because they had heard that the branch had bought like satellites and infrastructure basically so that communications would be maintained throughout Armageddon. And I was like,
I feel like we need to just do like
crazy.
a full show on JW conspiracy theories like this, or like
it's
like
really
urban
good.
legend
This
lore.
is fun. I
really
like this.
good because
Good little area.
I could keep going. I mean, I grew up like believing this as like fact, that when the governing body had new light or released new light, that it was because they were receiving letters from all over the world from all kinds of other anointed people.
Yes.
Because at that point they were the remnant of the anointed. So they were like a representative of the anointed left on earth. And so then, you know, your mind goes to, well, how do they represent this group? Like they must be in contact with them. Right?
Yes.
And I don't know if this got floated at Bethel, if it was like official, like an official story, or if it was just urban legend. But
this is a huge thing. This is like an important thing, in my opinion, because so part of Crisis of Conscience by Raymond Franz, like when there's this kind of schism happening at Bethel where the kind of like a few of the higher ups who are in the know with like people like Ray Franz, governing body helper types, they were questioning stuff like the 144,000 being literal and why in 1914 clearly doesn't add up because of six, like all the things that we're still saying now, right? But one of the things was that the doctrinal teaching at the time, and it had been for a long time, was that the faithful and discreet slave meant all anointed people as a class on the planet, and the governing body were just happened to be the representatives of the anointed. But the implication was that all of the anointed all over the world, like you said, would communicate with the governing body, like that they would write letters or have some kind of correspondence or meetings, or I assumed it would be it's some kind of divine thing that they're all experiencing something.
Yeah, the way it was explained to me, that it was like it was a way they knew that this was like God's direction, because they would get all these letters like all at once or something. Like
the way the zombies in the TV edition of The Last of Us kind of are able to tap their roots into the ground and communicate across long distances because they're like all fungus in the earth or something. Like that was sort of the idea with the anointed. But like, so Raymond Franz eviscerates this teaching and how it doesn't add up at all, and how clearly the faithful and discreet slave is functionally the governing body only, and the anointed have, like, all over the world, just random anointed people have absolutely no influence on doctrine. So it's like he dedicates a whole chapter of his very long book to this. And the year that he died, like the year after he dies in 2011, that's when they changed the teaching to what it is now, which is that the governing body are the faithful and discreet slave. So they changed it to what he argued for in Crisis of Conscience after he died. So,
but they couldn't do it once he was alive. They couldn't give him the win.
Right. And it was just him pointing out the obvious fact that just clearly wasn't how it worked. Like what we were hearing about how the anointed were communicating with the governing body, just like that wasn't happening. And to the point where I remember as a witness in 2011 studying that Watchtower, thinking like, wait, didn't we already kind of believe that the governing body were the faithful and discreet slave? You kind of gaslight yourself into thinking like, well, that's basically what we already believed. But
I think you've pointed this out on your channel too, about how they'll point out, they'll sort of do a gaslighting where it's sort of like, yeah, wasn't it so ridiculous that we ever believed this thing that we made you all believe?
How silly. Like, what? You told us that like last week that was true. I told somebody that this morning on my way to the convention. Logo, you and I talked, right, on the show?
Yeah.
Or on the call-in thing. Now you're a theist or a deist or maybe some kind of believer. Is that true?
Yeah, I'm sympathetic to theism, but I wouldn't call myself a Christian per se. Maybe like a Christian in ethic, but not a Christian in faith. And then, I think certain arguments or philosophical arguments for theism work for me. But as Nick might point out, I think my type of, in quotes, theism is borderline atheism. I almost collapse the two into
I agree. Yeah,
the same category.
Deism, you said?
Theism. I think.
You think theism is borderline atheism?
Yeah. Well,
his specific version is.
Oh, okay. Well, if my favorite kind of ice cream is actually pancakes, then if we're doing that,
yeah, no, it's a whole thing. But I usually tell people I'm just an atheist, because if I try to explain to them the particular form of theism that I affirm or hold to, then they would just be like, I don't know what the hell you're talking about, man.
Yeah, no, that I kind of get that. I always feel like I have to kind of explain, like, I'm an atheist. Let me tell you 5 things about what you might be thinking. Like, immediately you feel like you have to qualify things.
Yep.
I feel that way about politics too, and a lot of labels in general, where I'm like, I just don't tend to like think of myself in a lot of different like boxes like that. Not in some trying to go against the grain kind of way. I think after leaving the witnesses, it does feel like, I don't know if I want to be on the record as committing real hard to like, this is my system that I ascribe. like I just kind of call myself a liberal sometimes, because it seems to me that most random people, normal people who aren't super online or engaged, or who might not have a nuanced understanding, just kind of understand that word to mean like sort of to the left. So I just say that. Mm-hmm. But then I might, if I said that to kind of an ardent leftist, socialist who understands liberals to be their enemy because liberals prop up capitalism or something, like, then it's like technically I'm arguing with somebody who I probably agree with on everything, but they're just like, we're arguing about definitions of words.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so I've kind of found myself, I think maybe as a result of doing the channel and trying to, in a way where you're trying to kind of explain everything from ground zero for every video, at least in some way that somebody could watch it who has no knowledge base and kind of know what I'm talking about. I think it does cause me to avoid trying to box my own beliefs in too much. Like, I feel like I have pretty strong moral convictions, but like the specific methods required to reach them, I could be convinced either way. And I think God, I just don't think about as much maybe as it seems some people do. So I don't have a totally great nuanced understanding of maybe what I technically am, if that made sense.
Yeah, no, I definitely get where you're coming from. It's actually funny because I did want to dive into some of those questions, because I feel
sure,
just given the nature of, like you said, your channel, you're right. Like, you do have to usually start from, in some sense, in quotes, from scratch, right? And kind of assume that, you know, there's probably somebody that just woke up 3 weeks ago, right? Like, what the hell's a liberal? What the hell's
yeah,
or whatever. So given that,
even non-witnesses, a lot of really just like average Americans can't really tell you what the difference is between a Republican, a Democrat. It's like some like kind of vague notions.
Not to throw Logo wildly off track, but my thing has always been like, if I went to that person over there at Wendy's and asked them to, if I went down the street and asked every single person I know to define capitalism, could they do it? I probably would get it wrong. And I feel like I basically understand it. No, most people have like a floaty general idea of what something is, and then you try to say it out loud and you realize you maybe don't actually understand it that well. So we're all just kind of talking in a lot of shorthand, and I'm always just kind of trying to figure out whatever the best shorthand is. And so sometimes I do feel like my language is a little like imprecise in some of those things.
What you pointed to in terms of that fuzziness, like asking questions, like that's actually the methodology of Socrates, which is funny. Just that you made me think of that, because you start by asking a question, which in itself questions or problematizes the definitions that people hold to, right? Like, what is justice? What is virtue? What is capitalism? And by asking those questions, you actually get them to think about those things, and that therein lies the in the Western tradition what we would consider philosophy proper. That's just what you made me think of then. But applying the method, I'm kind of interested in terms of maybe some of those areas, like maybe unpacking some of that, because I feel like we get to that some of the time, you know, as an audience member. Something I was going to point to earlier was like, I feel like in some sense I know you parasocially, right?
Yeah.
Because I watch your content. but I feel like in some sense people don't know that much about you. Maybe they just know like, yeah, Jake Altworldly, but they don't really know your personal convictions or positions or what have you.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I'm probably more selective than people think in terms of like what I feel comfortable talking about. Like I really value being like totally honest and like authenticity and trying to just emulate people that I like and who maybe wanted to YouTube. It seemed like there's a certain amount of vulnerability that I found really, really useful just in figuring out who I was as a person when I was maybe younger, and then as an adult questioning my beliefs. And so a lot of it, yeah, I am kind of trying to do a balancing act of like, I want to be vulnerable and let people know that like they're seen and that we're all fucked up, and like nobody is incapable of being like an asshole or egotistical or a little bit full of themselves. So I try and be, well, I don't have to try to be self-depreciating. That's just my constant reflex that I've developed from the time I was a small child, it seems. But that it is more of like a tightrope that you're walking when you start to just get any feedback and you start to see opinions of people who I was like, wow, I would have never thought that anyone would think that I would have meant that by that sentence I said. I guess I should think more carefully about this area. And so then you just kind of like, I don't know. I'm always like kind of strategically trying to figure out like, what's going to be too distracting for people if I bring up this subject? What, like, yeah, I'm thinking about that stuff.
I do want to glaze you a little bit because it's you were really helpful to my wife and I wanted to tell you that, and thank you personally. I feel privileged to be able to tell you that, and I think we have you could probably tell our listeners won't be able to see this, but like my office looks pretty similar to your your background. I got a lot of nerdery back here. I've got a Legend of Zelda poster on my wall.
Wait, you do?
I'm a big Star Wars nerd. I'm writing I'm writing an epic fantasy right now. It just seems like we have a ton in common. And so you were just somebody that I was, and we're kind of similar age and stuff. You seem like somebody that I like. You immediately talked to me in a way that wasn't like apostasy, which I was a little bit worried about coming out because like, and yeah, you just seemed like a real person. You didn't seem like somebody who was so embittered by the organization that you had a chip on your shoulder, even though you had reasons to. And I mean, you know, we've all been traumatized by the group for sure. But your content really, it just felt very genuine and authentic and not sort of reactionary, like anti-propaganda. And that I think was what really resonated.
Thank you. That's really nice. I really appreciate that. I don't know what to say to that other than I really appreciate it. I started doing it because I wanted to do YouTube anyway, and I'm like, well, wait, now I actually have something to talk about. It's not just like my opinions on Mario instead of the people that I was watching. Like now I feel like I've got a take on things and an excuse to kind of like apply myself in a YouTube-y direction. And I'm always worried, especially now that I come across as a bitter apostate. I was really trying not to, but I guess one thing that's kind of tough is that like you don't actually know what you're expecting an apostate to be when you're a witness, because they don't really tell you that many specific details. There's just a lot of scary vibes are conjured. And so I say that and I'm like, wait, I do actually intentionally start a lot of videos with scary vibes and cartoonishly scary music. So that can't be right. I don't know what I'm doing, but I appreciate that you say it was helpful.
Not the fire temple songs to the governing body.
Yes.
when I first woke up, I had this idea to make an exact replica of jw.org, but make it like black and red with like flames and like make it as like demonic looking as like obvious, like it obviously like anti-apostate or anti-organization
like,
as possible or something.
Avoid JW almost leans in that direction a little bit, where like they've got a little tongue-in-cheek description for things. Yeah. I remember seeing in the early 2000s a website. I think I came across it by accident because computers were new technology like to my life, and I didn't understand what Googling things on the internet was. And it was a scary black web page with like enter if you dare kind of vibes. And so that stuck in my mind for a long time of like that's what apostasy is. It's a scary secret demon man who's trying to freak you out. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, you're gaslighted as a witness into thinking that apostates are going to be deceptive.
Yeah. No, you're not.
That they're going to lie.
No,
like,
that's not
whatever
true.
They say to you is going to be exactly. No, you're triggering me. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, and it's like, and so yeah, there's I think like you've filled a valuable niche there. And there's there's other creators that were very helpful to me also, but what, and this might actually be helpful for you to just hear about our channel and our project and like why we're doing what we're doing is like we both feel like there's a lot of great anti-witness or like counter apologetics that exists now, and we don't really have much to add there. That's not really what I think channels like what you do, what Lloyd Evans has done over the years, granted he's had
checkered passes too,
his issues or whatever, but like there was a lot
I've never had any bad interactions with him
personally,
but I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, it's just whatever, it is what it is, but like a lot of his content's very effective at deconstructing theology, and he's got a lot of it, and so all of that stuff I think is great and very valuable. The way this started is that we're both ex-JWs. We first started interacting on Twitter, and I kind of came out when I first left and really woke up and like committed to waking up. I sort of came out like guns blazing. I was double barreling like every theist I could find, every Christian I could find online pretty much. And Logo was there to kind of pump the brakes on me a little bit. And just sort of like rechannel maybe some of that frustration at the organization and with Christianity generally as I saw it at the time, and belief in God, and all of these. It was just so it was so emotional. It felt logical. It felt sort of like, oh, like I've like sort of woken up to the truth now, and I'm going to attack the thing that is the anti-truth. And but it really was like so heavily emotional. Yes. I was overreacting and getting reactionary, right? And so we had a lot of long like afternoon conversations. He's a philosophy guy, right? As you can tell, we've already talked about this a little bit, but and the Socrates reference probably hinted at that already. But and as our listeners know, we talk a fair amount of philosophy on this channel, but that was really helpful to me to like get me to just clean up my thinking, just to like, okay, I've got all these like these frustrations about having been a witness. I got all these emotions. I'm watching all of this these debates online between atheists and Christians. I think you've engaged in some of that too. And yeah, it's really easy to just start getting sucked into like rooting for another team, or some people might say even joining another cult. I think we've seen evidence online now that that's a danger for witnesses. I think a lot of ex-JWs will find themselves getting involved in like different kinds of conspiracy rabbit holes, and there's whatever. You could get involved in political cults, and that happens on the left also. And so that was really the purpose of our channel, was just like, hey, let's turn these conversations, which I find incredibly helpful to help me like tease apart all of my deconstructing that's going on right now, and try to get at the core like of who I am and what I believe, which could be that I'm a Christian. I don't know. I'm an agnostic. And I'm still I would call myself more of an atheist than a theist at this point, but I'm trying to leave the door open to something, because I realize there's a lot of trauma there that's preventing me from thinking totally clearly about religion and about Christianity in particular. And so, yeah, that's our goal on here. Why we were excited to have you on too, is just because I thought maybe that process in some little miniaturized form here might be helpful to you. And you guys had already had that conversation on your stream recently that I thought was awesome. It was really interesting. I was in on that, and I really enjoyed the brief interaction.
It was lovely. And I love that so much. That makes me really happy. I'm really philosophically not well read or informed or brained at all. So
I wasn't either at all. Yeah.
You know, my knowledge base comes from watching a lot of videos on YouTube where people explain to me what philosophers have said, and then I feel very smart when I'm watching it. And in the second that the YouTube video is over, I don't retain the information at all. Like, I remember what the person was saying that made me start thinking, but I don't remember anything about like what philosophical like arguments, whatever. And I still feel I do enjoy listening to the atheist debate stuff sometimes. And I'm really interested in the way that they are interested in logical fallacies and rhetoric and philosophy too. It's like a very different language than my brain tends to speak in, but I don't really know why that is. I think that I grew up in a family that, well, you know how it is with I fucking have to explain this. Sorry, and also, I'm sorry I cursed. I can not.
No, it's fine.
I just realized, like, you obviously know exactly what I'm talking about. The worldly wisdom and empty philosophies, is that the phrase that they would use? Mm-hmm. We were.
Oh, there's like a visceral, like if you even like mention like that you're reading a philosopher or something like that, you couldn't even really mention that.
Yeah, I'm trying to imagine like
company.
If you raise your hand at the meeting and was like, you know, Socrates once said, like that comment would be controversial.
I was reading Nietzsche the other day.
I need to talk to you after the meeting, and it's like,
did you find that quote in a Watchtower magazine by any chance? If you search Socrates on the Watchtower CD-ROM, you probably find like 0 results. No, that's not true. I'm sure they mentioned him in passing, but I also would not imagine that, you know, a Watchtower article will start with one expert once said, but it would not say one philosopher once said. And so you're right. I think I still have that thing in my head where I'm a little bit like that. Okay, philosophy is a bunch of useless thinking about things and then doing nothing. Like, but I know it's not true. Like, because finding new ways of thinking is literally what has saved our lives. So on some level, I understand that philosophy is important and that I'm engaging with it, probably unconsciously in some way. But I'm definitely not ever attempting to learn anything new about philosophy as a consumer in our capitalist world. I'm a consumer, and that's how I see myself.
Yep, fair enough. I mean, I think we're all to some degree, shape, way, or form, right? Like we're all products of the context that we find ourselves in. Kamala Harris quote.
Yes. Yes.
So obviously, yeah. I think
you said it with about 28 less words.
I think she said it perfectly, and no one was confused the whole time. I love that. I think about it all the time. I'm really annoyed that I feel like if I said it, it would definitely be seen as like a derogatory meme, because I really do think a lot about the fact that we exist in the context of everything that came before us. Like,
we do. No, I don't.
I remember it's actually
a really good point. She was like,
started going viral. I was like, well, I like that. I like that part. I was like, that's the first thing she said that I do like. But I also understand why people were like, why are you, this is a lot of words to say that a history happened and now we're here.
But I think that you guys touch on this, which is that I think a lot of the times after waking up, people find it hard to like reconcile, right? Like, I don't have a coherent worldview. The truth that I had was a bunch of BS, and what do I have now, right? A lot of people pivot either hard left, hard right, and whatever, and however that manifests itself, whether that be I'm a born again Christian, and I'm gonna turn to Orthodox Christianity. I'm gonna become a communist. I'm going to. Some people don't even need that, right? Some people just wake up and they're like, I guess I'm gonna have Starbucks on Sundays now earlier than I than I did before.
Yeah. And probably it's some combination of all those things where you're like, well, I got to figure out which thing I am. And oh man, I'm also going to sleep in every Saturday forever on, like, you know.
I mean, I think also for me, I went through, I don't know if this was true for you, but I definitely went through a period of like real nihilism too, right? And I think more than anything, that's probably why I really felt like I did need to start digging a little bit deeper into my thinking, because it was heading in a bad way. I think I was just really getting like to a place where I felt really like hopeless.
I can relate to that, and I can't. Like, I personally and selfishly, I always feel like I'm minutes away from being doomed and homeless and outed as a fraud and a failure who doesn't know anything, and that everybody secretly hates me. Like, that I absolutely believe firmly. That's my religious belief now. But I don't feel nihilistic about the world. Like, I feel the weirdest thing that's happened to me is I felt immediately more optimistic about the future than I did as a Jehovah's Witness, where I felt like this big weight lifted off my shoulders of like, oh God, there's not like an Armageddon scheduled in the near future that is going to feature fireballs raining down from heaven and punishments to, like, to the extent that the world can end. It just won't be like that. It will be a totally mysterious new way to discover. And I also felt that just I felt really motivated to just be involved. And I don't know, I felt really hopeful about it.
It's interesting you're saying this, because I am remembering now that was my very initial reaction was relief. So I totally get what you're saying there. I think it was more as time went on, like I was kind of expecting like, oh, I'm free now. Like I have this whole new life I can live or something. I'm like 40. I'm married. I don't have a whole new life I can live. Right. Like, and like how much is really going to change? And then sort of as time went on, I tended to focus more on just what I lost, you know, my friends, my worldview and things like that. And then
yes, that stuff, I experienced that, and it still comes in waves. I'll still have moments where I'm like, it really sinks in time that was missed. And I've had to deal more with denialism lately, where I did and do still believe in the kind of broad, I say democracy. I guess what I mean by that is like I believe in pluralism in the fact or equality in the fact that all humans deserve to be alive at a bare minimum. Like,
whoa!
And I hate to come in here with hot takes, but I feel like if I can, I guess, give Logos some kind of flag planted in the ground in terms of like a solid belief I have. It's not floaty. It's that like we were all born, whether we liked it or not. That's the one common denominator of all people, is that none of us chose to be born, and you don't get to choose anything about the fact that you were born. It is like if you did a character in a video game and the like constellation sign that gives you your perks is totally randomized every time. And, you know, you're going to have either extreme advantages or disadvantages, or you're going to be kind of somewhere down the middle. And because of that, we need to create a society where, at the very least, we acknowledge that we should try and like equalize that starting point and take certain things as a given, such as that everybody needs food and shelter and clothing. Like everybody needs access to healthcare, and everybody needs access to community. Like those are things that, generally speaking, we've figured out you need to survive as a person, and we have enough resources to do it. So the only reason why we wouldn't do it is because we're making a choice that some people are worse and do not deserve to have an equal opportunity in life. And I don't believe that some people are better than others innately. In terms of a list of like character traits and things, like accomplishments and like deeds that have been done, yeah, some people are better than others, but like on some fundamental level, I think that we're all, born a blank slate. Whatever that all was, that's kind of my main thinking. And so that is why I guess I felt like when I first woke up, I was very much like, well, I really like the idea of democracy, because I never had a choice in how anything went in, like, let's say the congregation, which was a social structure in my...
Wait, we could do those votes for like approving money that the elder body had already
That's a great point. That's a great point. We did have the illusion. We had Russian style elections where there was an illusion of a choice, but really you would be bullied into the consensus, and anybody who did not agree would probably just be ignored.
It's almost worse.
Yes.
Than not having elections
at all.
Is having...
That is the indignity that, like, that's where the nihilism for me starts to sink in. Like, oh God, what is that going to be like in 2028, where we have a fucking sham election for the pre-chosen president? Yeah, but like, I just can't go there because I don't actually know that's going to happen, because technically tomorrow, the president could slip in the bathroom and crack his head open
in Minecraft
because he's old.
In Minecraft.
In Minecraft, sorry. And I don't mean that in some like violent threat way. Like, I thought about this a lot during the Joe Biden administration. That was a man who did not stride with like youthful vigor across the tarmac. That's a man who required some assistance. And we're like, anytime you watched him, and I had some respect in a lot of ways for Joe Biden, but anytime I saw him move, I was very worried. And so every day I thought, well, this could be the day that he dies. And literally nobody on planet Earth would be surprised. And yet it would change everything in the whole world if that happened. Like, it wouldn't be surprising. It could happen. And it would, like, just everything would be different if that would have happened, right? And like, and I'm not even talking about it in a political point of view, but at some point in the year 2021, Joe Biden could have fallen down the little slide that comes out of the plane and dies horribly, like an episode of Coffin Flop.
I'm reasonably sure he died about a year into his presidency, actually.
He never arrived fully at the White House, but that could have happened at any point. That would have resulted in a completely different reality, where Kamala Harris would have been the vice president in 2021. A lot of things just would have been a little bit different about our world if that had happened, and none of us could have done anything about it. So I guess my very long way of speaking was like, that's how I try and approach life, where I think that it's very important to be actively engaged in advocating for a better world in terms of, like, we have value systems where we care about each other, and like that is a thing. Like, humans are more important than any like structural system that could possibly like dominate humans. Like, the humans are more important. And so that is the thing that I know that I'll just always have. I'm not going to stop caring about injustice. That part comes pretty easily to me. So then you worry about the next thing. And what's the next thing I can do? You can do some things, but you can't. Me, as a guy who works at in sterile processing in the day and then makes YouTube videos at night, there's a limited ability that I have to affect the course of human history with like freaking out on Twitter, so that I don't really worry about it too much. I don't know. Sorry. I guess I'm trying to unpack my belief system in some way and package it to logo, so you can tell me why I'm wrong in philosophically incoherence.
It's funny because I usually, and Nick knows this, I usually give people a lot more credit than maybe in some cases they even deserve. But the reason why
I've never been accused of that.
Or then they might give themselves even too, I think, because like, as we talked about, well, we'll get into this, but a lot of this is down, like you're the way you kind of interact in the world, what you just described, like, so this is sort of who I am and how I engage in the world and kind of how I generally try to be as a person. That kind of is philosophy. I mean, that's
interesting.
Yeah.
So I think that's true. Like, I guess that is more like, that's part of my personal philosophy. And the other big part, I think, is that I really don't like it when people say that, like, you don't owe anybody anything, because like I think we owe each other a lot, because we all have to put up with each other's shit, like whether we like it or not.
Yeah, no, but this is actually a debate I've been engaged in with lately online, which I can't believe I have to debate this with people. But if you were walking along on your morning walk or whatever, and you saw a small child drowning in a stream, and there was no danger to you in any way, like, this is not a raging river where you're going to possibly die if you go and help this person, right? This is just, oh, there's somebody drowning there, and I could just like reach out my hand and like pull them out of the water, right? I might get my shoe a little muddy or something, but it's no risk to me whatsoever. Are you morally obligated? Not like, would it be a good thing to help the person, but is it a moral obligation for you to help that person or not? And I think the answer to that question, to me, there's an obvious answer to this. To me, it's not hard, but it doesn't seem like that's a universal.
Well, that's kind of, I guess, why it's this like curmudgeonly attitude towards philosophy, where I'm like, why are you trying to intellectualize saving a kid from drowning? Just save him. What are you like, that's like my granddad's voice coming out when it's like, what are you talking about? Just save the cat. I don't want to hear about this scenario anymore. Like, I just start thinking about my dad getting annoyed that I'm presenting hypotheticals to him, which happens when I was trying to, like, explain why I had doubts about the organization. I do think it's a moral obligation in the sense that, like, I think that we know what it is to suffer, and we know what it is to need help from other people. And if we all lived in a world where everybody didn't, like, where everybody made a conscious choice to not help the person drowning, then there would, there wouldn't be that many people left. There would be a lot less, and the lifeguard industry would be in a shambles. So I think,
or could it even, like, is it even a neutral decision? Like, imagine going home to your wife afterward and being like, so weird thing on my walk today, I saw this little girl drowning, and your wife was like, oh, she's okay now, right? And you're like, no, I think she made it, actually.
I think she's worse now that she's dead.
From my perspective, I don't think that's a morally neutral, like.
Here's where you would get a different reaction, is if you brought that to a philosopher and they would say, now hang on a second, let's talk about this. What was the kid, I couldn't think of anybody other than Hitler, the typical leftist. I couldn't think of a single human being.
Oh, you haven't met a libertarian then, apparently.
Yeah, no, I guess I do feel that is a moral obligation, but in the sense that for society to function, we need engaged citizens. Like, I think we have seen the result of broad apathy when it comes to understanding, like, your role in how, let's say, the United States government and like the federal government and state government systems, people, the slow erosion of civics lessons and even having requirements of understanding how your governments work, and less access to education, and poorer resources for teachers and program, all these problems, to where you have a world where there's a populace who's pretty disengaged from the systems that impact their lives. People think that they don't care about politics, but if you're suddenly told that you can't drink the tap water anymore, and that if you feed it, like if you give it to your cat or your dog, that they'll die, well, politics has impacted your life in some way, because now the like water sanitation people, Waterworks, that's the monopoly
Water
version.
Yeah.
The Waterworks company, who in the 1930s it was Waterworks. But like, what I'm trying to say is like, I think we see what happens like when, in order for a human species, like a community to function, like everybody does have to have a role in order for everyone to feel fulfilled and for everyone to get along. Whatever those roles are, people figure that out. But it seems like, well, there's a lot of people who have no idea how anything impacts their lives, and then they feel helpless and don't bother engaging with it. Then things just happen to you. And bad people who take advantage of weaker people or disadvantaged people will come in. Because even though we are, I think, all born at a neutral level on some degree, there are going to be people who grow up and do horrible atrocities because of whatever. These are bad chemicals, bad brain chemicals or whatever. I'm not a scientist or a brain doctor. So like you need to make sure you counterbalance that inevitability. Like we know that there's going to be evil people. So we need to have a counterforce of people, of lifeguards. There's going to be drowners. There's going to be people who drown people on purpose. So we should probably proactively create the lifeguard program, which apparently I'm very attached to. I mentioned it 80,000 times.
Well, but yeah, so maybe like if we don't want to have to worry about like checking the river when we're taking our dog on a walk every morning, yeah, maybe we pitch in like $1 a year,
right?
So
or like just
all have
a road to get to a place of employment. Like if you've ever used a road, you have some amount of investment in how politics impacts your life, because roads are built via political decisions, and like. So you just have to decouple the idea that politics means voting for a president in an election. Like that's not what politics is. And I think what I'm learning is that philosophy is not just people who wore togas having soliloquies.
Yeah.
And something about a Parthenon, maybe.
No, I think that's funny. I think usually that argument about roads is used to counter the libertarian position, right? It's like, no, it seems like we have some sort of like social cohesion or some like minimal state that actually advocates to build the roads, right? Like we all use roads. The Roman Empire used roads.
Yeah, imagine like you just walked outside tomorrow and there was just guys with guns who said, "This is now my apartment. Sorry, you are gone." And then you said, "This can't possibly be." And so you went to no one because there's no police and and nobody owns anything, because, like you have to acknowledge the fact that as an animal species, we are tribal, we are communal, we like being around each other. And humans, we build societies. It's what we do. That's just going to happen. And so there's going to be more people. Another thing we do is that we have sex a lot. Not me, but a lot of other people, apparently.
Some of us, yeah.
And according to some people, we're not nearly having enough, by the way. So that might not even be true. But there's enough babies being born where we have to kind of accommodate for their existence in some way, so we have to have some way of like acknowledging that all human beings are going to have to not be constantly trying to murder each other. So you got to try to figure out something that can accommodate all human beings, it seems to me.
No, I think that's good. And at whatever level of depth that we tackle these questions, right, that we even approach the notion of cooperation, of being what we find beautiful, what ought we do, at any level of analysis, I think that's already like a step forward. I think that's already to be doing philosophy in the minimal or in the broad sense. Because, you could say, like you said, there's a sense of apathy, right? That a lot of people have. They have a general malaise towards society. They're like, oh, well, I'm not getting involved in politics because it doesn't affect me. But like you said, I think that's even to almost be, in some sense, naive or nihilistic in terms of like what impact your choices have on other people, and vice versa, what the choices of other people have on you. That being said, I think that something that we keep harkening back on is this idea of we're embodied people. We are a social species. We are a social animal. We are embodied beings, and how you think about others and how you choose to act that out, that is an ethics, right? That is a morality. That is how ethics comes about. How we perceive other people, how we even think about them, and therefore how we interact with them, how we actually establish any meaningful connection with others.
Yeah. No, I like that. I do think that if nothing else, I have had to learn how to just stop and think about what I'm thinking about. I am a fan of the Green brothers, Hank and John Green. I discovered their stuff actually weirdly not that long ago, I feel like, kind of, as an apostate, maybe. John Green said this thing that apparently another, like an author told him, and this was like advice on how to be an author or novelist, but the Octavia Butler told him to pay attention to what you pay attention to. They meant in terms of like if your job is you're going to be a writer and try and capture a bunch of details about human life, then you actually have to kind of train your brain to study that so that you can then use it in your writing. And I do think that what I've learned, having been in a cult, is it's really easy to not pay attention to why you think any of the things that you think, and to just lock into this script where you're just repeating kind of things you've heard and slightly rephrasing them so they sound like new ideas. It's really easy to get used to like a terrible standard of living, and that just becomes your new normal. And so you kind of are incapable of imagining any greater form of happiness because you've just made sure that you're in a community that's constantly telling you that you are as happy as you could possibly be, and because everybody outside of the group is miserable. If I had ever really stopped and been like, you know what, I need to have a real think about what I just heard. That person made an extraordinary claim. That was never a thing that really consciously crossed my mind. But sometimes you hear something.
If you do that, I think you're probably already starting the questioning process.
Yeah.
In a lot of cases, right?
But everybody, and we all realize that when we leave and we start thinking back at our experiences, I was talking about this with Christina, is like, we think that we were a good witness who never doubted anything. But then when we deconstruct and you start to hear other ex-witnesses start to talk about why they left, they'll say something and you'll think, I guess, you know what? That bothered me too. I guess I didn't really believe that part of it. Like, that part of the belief wasn't the thing I was latching onto. That was a big difference that me and Christina had. And why, we both left the witnesses, but it took longer for her, not because, just like I left. My reasons were different. And I was very attached to the organization as the organization, like Jehovah's Witnesses as the organization was really important to me. The fact that we had the truth in some sense of every one of our doctrines is like the most correct of all doctrinal understandings of the Bible. Ours are right. Like there's a correct solution to the puzzles presented in the mystery box that God gave us in the Bible. There's a real answer. And Jehovah's Witnesses have it. That was my conception of it. And I think for Christina, so like for me, when I was able to start like allowing my brain to realize like, I don't think that this makes sense logically. I do not think that this adds up. The Garden of Eden story has some plot holes, in my opinion, as I currently understand it. And I don't think that was a literal event. I just don't. That wasn't Christina's attachment to the organization, which was more communal and more about her like personal relationship with God and or what she thought was maybe a personal relationship. So what I learned was that, like, we all see the world very differently. Like, we all have very different attachments to our beliefs, but we had all reached the same wrong conclusion anyway. And it all kind of resulted from none of us stopping and thinking about any of it. And it's not until we find a little section of the theology that conflicts with that personal attachment. Well, this is why I'm in the movie. This is why I believe it's the truth. And that little thing has now just been shaken. That's the only thing that really starts to get people to question. And so when I think about my parents, I understand I'm just talking about Jehovah's Witness stuff, but I've been going through a lot. Let me try and work through this just for my own benefit.
Feel free to lay down, too, if you need.
Yeah, if I've got another chair here. If I actually,
if you have a couch or something,
there's another chair, like another office chair. Like I could just kind of lean down. It'd be perfect. So my grandfather passed away last week, and so I've been been more confronted with the shunning stuff. Been thinking about it, and the different things that kind of.
He was a witness too.
Yeah, he was a Jehovah's Witness, and so this is my grandfather. His dad was also a Jehovah's Witness. So going back to my great grandfather, every generation of my family has lived in expectation that they would not grow old and die, and they all have. And now my dad's getting older, and we're all dying all the time. So I've seen all these different generations of my family just be wrong. That's a different experience than my dad had. Fewer generations had yet to be wrong. Now I've got more that have been wrong in the interim. And I can also see that it hasn't really made them happy. Like that it seems to be maybe the source of unhappiness in their lives. Apparently shunning is not something that my dad and mom had a problem with, right? Like that's not one of the things that is going to get them to question the religion. If there's a thing, and I do think that everybody could have a thing that could make them question their core beliefs, no matter whatever cult, conspiracy theory. But I do think it is very dependent on the person.
It's all relevant. I mean, all of this is how we navigate our beliefs in our world. I think what you said resonates with me a lot. I'm a fifth generation on both sides. I think.
Man,
my mom, my dad said I'm 5.
It's wild.
We go way back to in Pennsylvania too. So like pretty close to where the organization's originally from. So like, I don't have any anointed in my family somehow. I don't know how that happened that far back, but
that's a bad.
I know what you're saying.
That's a string of bad luck. 5 generations, none going to heaven. Nobody in your family. Sorry.
Must be some kind of bloodline.
One in mine. I got one in heaven. Sorry.
Yeah, sweet. Oh, fine. You win.
Shout out, Nelson.
It's a shame that as witnesses we can't pray to our to the anointed as like saints or something, right?
That is a nice thing about Christianity that I liked when I
That's kind of cool.
started deconstructing. Is like, I love my grandma Pat. That was the only real big family member death that was really like important to my life before now. Of my family, Christina's dad, my father-in-law died. That was the other biggest one. But the goal was just like, well, see him again pretty soon, I guess. They keep saying it's soon. I'll be seeing him soon in person. Whereas you can kind of have this consistent connection if you believe that your loved one is in heaven and like you can talk to them. It's really nice. And by the way, you can do that anyway. Like you can talk to your dead loved one just therapeutically. My dad's not actually dead. He just treats me like I'm dead because we're shuns. I open emails all the time and start writing letters that I never send. But it's kind of nice to have that experience of like, I need to communicate with this person even though they're not there. and it's valuable. Like, I would acknowledge that prayer is valuable. I wish that I had, I would like to, maybe I should say, I would like to kind of find a secular version of it that I could engage in. The closest I've come over the last like 2 months, because that specific thing has been on my mind, the like prayer was actually really helpful because it is being alone with your own thoughts. That's a thing that I so actively try to avoid, like on a regular basis. I hate being alone with my own thoughts. I'm always listening to a podcast or music or an audiobook when I'm doing anything. And sometimes even at the same time as playing a video game, I'm also listening to a podcast. The other day I put on a television show and read a book at the same time. So what was that accomplished? It was all an attempt to like, I don't want to just sit here and just think, because what that is it forces you to sort through all of your feelings, all of the things that you are sorry about. I like the idea of apologizing to God a little bit, not to God, but just like, you know what? I kind of messed up today. I should probably process that. Like those are good things that we don't have a great secular equivalent.
I was going to say, maybe not the God of the Old Testament, Yahweh, the one that's angry about it all.
We're gonna be sacrificing two turtle
definitely
doves.
The God of the New Testament, right? Where he's like, yeah, it's all right.
Yeah, I mean, pray to the God of the Old Testament at your peril. He a lot of times just like, why do you think that you could ask me questions? Like the moral of the Job story is like, why did you ever ask me any follow up to this? Yeah. What happened to you? Do you know who I am? Do you know who my dad is? Nobody.
Which, like, at least we know God's sarcastic, though, from that account. So I kind of appreciate
that's something that I think is really underrated about the Bible, is that we don't know the tone. We don't actually know the tone that was intended.
I read it as sarcastic.
And, well, we know the tone. We, here on this podcast, we know the tone of the Bible, which is deeply sarcastic and mean-spirited and funny. And God is a scamp. But and Jesus was also very funny sometimes. And like, I think the Job account is absolutely incredible. I mean, it is like a series of unfortunate events, quite literally, but also in just it's kind of absurdly funny that just God and the devil are like, yeah, okay, just ruin this guy's fucking life. And then it is ruined and it sucks. And then at the end of it, Job is like, God, why'd you do that? And God's like, let me tell you why that was a mistake of you to ask me that question. I'm going to talk now for 10 chapters about why you're an asshole and how great I am. That's funny. That's a funny idea for a story.
You know, the account of him, of Job getting, like the things back tenfold, like he gets children.
That was a later priestly edition, wasn't it?
Yeah, the consensus now is that that's the complete fabrication, like decades after the original.
That was my favorite thing I learned about the Old Testament. I think the Old Testament, even as an XRW, it's funny how you enjoy the Bible a lot more when you're not so attached to it being literally true. Like, it's so fun to dive into the history of and just the kind of scholarship that's gone into trying to figure out certain things. Like, that's all really fun to figure out. I didn't know.
Yeah, and a lot of
but I didn't know that there were different people going in and adding different parts of the Bible later. I didn't know that as a witness. Never occurred to me. It makes so much sense. It's so funny. And every time you point it out, it's like, oh yeah, that is a thing that feels a little tacked on to be like, don't please continue to serve your religious leaders. By the way, at the end there, just gonna add that in. The Job story is way funnier.
Like the fact that there's like two creation accounts.
Yeah.
Like in chapter one, something I read Genesis a million times as a witness. I never really noticed. There's like this kind of second version of the events, right? Like,
yeah, but like, I don't know. The moral of all that was that the Job story is way funnier if it just ends with like the end. Job got totally cucked by the cosmos.
Because something I had never thought about as a witness, which is absurd, is that God gave him like replacement kids. Like, I mean, if he was really gonna like try to make him whole, like he could have resurrected his actual kids. Oh, right.
Well,
like,
what kind of Jehovah's Witness were you saying things like this? Let me steal man Jehovah's Witnesses. Let me steal man
resurrection.
That's why.
Law. That's crazy.
No. Here's why. Because Job was actually given twice as many kids as he had before, because he was given the blessing of new children. And then
that's right.
In the paradise earth, his old kids that he probably mourned and got over and hadn't thought about in a long time by the time he died.
Now, so he actually got double the blessing, because now he has double the amount of
double
kids.
honor that we heard about.
Yeah.
It started there. In this totally hypothetical thing that they've tacked onto the Job account.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that was interesting for me to learn after I left was that, like you said, that not only is there like a bunch of stuff added into the Bible at different time periods, and it's just this kind of cobbled, like, I don't want to, mess is a little bit meaner than I mean it, but like it's sort of like a living, breathing like document, right? That's changing through time. And not every Christian religion believes that you have to take every verse as if it was like written by God.
Yes.
That the entire book is infallible or inerrant. And I think that that really does kind of open you up a little bit if you realize that, because that's one of the first routes I went down when I woke up, was just all the problems with the Bible, because the Bible was the core of my faith as a witness, and all Protestant religions, really, this is the case, right? Like pretty much the Bible is the bedrock. So if somebody can poke holes in the Bible, then you're like, well, okay, I guess Christianity is just not true, but that's not actually the case. Like,
correct.
Catholicism and Orthodox Christianity don't really need to affirm, like, the Bible as being this literal, like, perfectly cohesive. They might think that it's cohesive in some sense, but not necessarily like in every detail, or that it's not, that it can't have certain kinds of errors in it.
That's what I believed for a while after I left. Because I had this thing where I was really enjoying reading the Bible, and especially the gospel, which takes on a very different meaning when you're not reading a translation which is constantly inserting Jehovah. And it's really obvious when you read what are considered to be respected translations of the Bible, that Jesus is the protagonist of the New Testament, and that he's the new God in town. Trinity, no, that had not been invented yet canonically, but certainly the idea that Jesus was the savior that you needed to pray to in his name, that was very obvious. And that idea of being a part of that myth was very satisfying. And I had the same thing where, like, discovering different Christian thinkers, realizing that there were people who, the thing that made me start thinking about it was just trying to figure out, like, oh wait, yeah, there are gay priests. What are they doing? How are they figuring their lives out? And just listening to what they said. And it was really interesting that they had this different take on the Bible as non-literal, and that we could agree on a great many things. And probably the only thing we disagree about is the literal question of, like, whether or not God exists or Jesus rose from the dead. And that was the thing that made me say that I'm at the very least not a Christian in any way, because I don't believe that. I don't believe that Jesus rose from the dead. I can't really accept that in my heart and say that I believe it wholeheartedly. I'd be lying a little bit, but I would like to, because that would be amazing if it was true. But it's not so hard to let go of a belief that is not quite so dogmatic. Like, when your belief system is already nuanced enough to include the possibility that it's wrong, then it's easy to change your mind about things when you accept new information. But when you're in a cult system, that's the thing you are, like, you cannot possibly conceive of the fact. A Jehovah's Witness would be just as irritated by some new evangelical type out there on YouTube arguing that it's, okay to be a liberal with tattoos who thinks gay people are okay. That like Jehovah's Witnesses would think that's just as perverse as me thinking that Jehovah doesn't exist at all, because it's not about the Bible at all. It's about we need what the governing body is saying to be true in order for us to not have to rethink our entire lives.
So we did a podcast a couple episodes ago where we did like a tier ranking of doubts about the organization or about JW theology. And it was, I think the real, like the biggest takeaway for me from it was that we thought that really the strongest arguments were things like, what basis is there for the governing body to claim that they should be believed or that their interpretation of scripture is correct, right? Like what once you really, if you even just like even have that question in your head, I think it's pretty hard to shake as a witness.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that like was really like a nail in the coffin for me once I actually started like seriously questioning. I could never wrap my head around what justification, what evidence that I have that these guys are getting any kind of divine. They don't call it inspiration, but it might as well be. It's the same,
right?
Same difference.
If they're lying
both ways, right?
I don't know anything for sure. Yeah, that's the thing you start thinking.
Right. But what after we ended up talking it through, we both kind of realized that like actually I don't think that's the thing that woke me up though, or that actually got me like questioning. It was really more of like personal stuff.
Yeah,
it was actually more of like. I had a friend who was chronic. He still is. He's been chronically ill for a long time and had all kinds of crazy health complications because of not taking blood. And there's a bunch of story there. But essentially, like I saw what this guy was going through, and that everybody was so sure that God was like answering prayers all along the way, and his life just kept getting worse and worse, and people just kept trying to like twist their thinking into pretzels. It was that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And like seeing somebody suffer, or like it reminded me of what you were just saying about like a grandparent dying or something. I feel like those emotional experiences are actually the thing.
Yes.
That really like shake somebody and then get them questioning, and then maybe the logic stuff. Like
the number one argument
to, like, pull the cards out.
The number one way is a completely internal emotional reaction to something that you cannot possibly like conjure on your own. It is for me, that first little thing was when I met my disfellowshipped uncle that I hadn't been allowed to talk to basically my entire life, because he lived in another country. He is someone who consciously left because he didn't believe it was true, and he had dreams he wanted to accomplish. He wanted to be a chef. And so he became a chef, and now he owns a restaurant in Spain. That's
good for him.
It's very good for him, but he's too busy to talk to me.
Yeah.
And also he lives in Spain. So it's like we're not like super tight now. My Uncle Stefan was in town. Uncle Stefan was in town when I was probably 16 or something. And because a family member of mine was sick. It was a family emergency. It's a big deal. So he came into town. I had never seen him before. I am expecting a embittered, disheveled monster who hates Jehovah viciously, right? He comes down. He looks exactly like my dad. They could be twin brothers. He just clearly is family, and what I'm saying, like, oh, I'm related to this person so hard that we have the same mannerisms. I've never talked to this person before. Had an amazing time. He has our sense of humor, so he was so funny. And I had never had that experience of meeting a family member, like a long lost family member, and being like, oh my God, this is amazing. I want this person in my life. And he is so fulfilled. He owns a restaurant. He made us amazing food that he had learned to make. That was, incredible. And he was so caring and was able to take care of the family in certain ways because of whatever. This was a person who had moved on with their life. Clearly, us shunning him had not made an impact on this like he just didn't believe it, had moved on with his life, is just a good man who is married to a lovely woman who I've met his wife, I guess with my aunts more times than my uncle. His kids are amazing. They're like geniuses. They're genius children. And I drove home from this family gathering the whole time. doubting and like kind of praying to God off and on the whole time, because I'm like, this doesn't make sense, because us shunning him is actually making him not a Jehovah's Witness. Like, the reason why he's not a Jehovah's Witness is probably because we're shunning him. It's not having any impact, which means it's just mean, which means I'm kind of unnecessarily cutting off this contact with a totally normal family member of mine for no reason. I'm processing that.
Who's still willing to be nice to you guys, cooking you food,
so
being charitable.
Nice. Yeah. So nice. I've never done any, I've literally avoided this person. Not that I had that many ways of contacting him, but still. And so what did I do? I don't know. I didn't think about it. I tried not to think about it that hard for another 10 years. And so those little things happen. In any group, but you just don't know it. That's that's why I think we clearly like to stop and think about the way we think and why we think, because looking back and taking inventory, it's really frustrating to see all the little off ramps you had that you just didn't know that you had, that you're like, why wasn't that the thing? Why wasn't I did have a little feeling? Why didn't I explore that? And so now, whenever you have that little feeling, you explore it. At least I do. And that can lead you to be slightly wishy-washy, which is annoying.
Yeah, I sort of have this issue now where I'm just constantly second guessing what I believe. In a probably in an unhealthy way now. Because I'm scared of planting my flag on anything in particular. For fear of being duped again, being wrong, having my own senses, because I think we're all, depending on your level of trauma or how long you were in, once you leave, you're like, man, I believe I would have died for this like religion. I literally would have.
Oh yeah.
And I was 100% dead wrong.
Yes.
And that's a hard thing to like overcome, to be like, I know what it's like to like have a wrong belief and believe it thoroughly to my core.
I'm really glad that you said that, actually, because I since that happened with my grandfather dying, it made me question everything I've done since leaving the witnesses, because I got to see my family again and really interact with them for the first time in 4 years. And I got to have a good conversation with my mom, which was actually I don't get to have. So it was good. We were worried about my dad and how he's going to react to everything. And so we, had an actual adult conversation about it. And it was good. Right. And I was like, it could be like this all the time. Clearly it's not that hard to just not talk about my, difficult problems with the religion. Like, I was there and reminiscing about old times like everybody else, and when I was hearing about the good times, I wasn't triggered. I thought I would be. I thought I would be really triggered and upset at the witnessiness of it all, and I wasn't, because that was his life that he lived and he loved and he believed it, and so many people loved him. And even though the belief system was wrong, he was a good man who did good things and helped people, right? And also hurt people, including his own son. We'll figure that out all in post later, but right. But I'm having that conversation with my mom, and she said that it was the fact that I'm vocal that makes, in their whatever conversations they've had, like, that's the red lines. The fact that I'm in an open apostate, right? She didn't say it like that, but in so many ways, I think they don't even like saying the word apostate, because
it's real or something.
Yeah, it's like, even if you think your son is an agent of Satan, not polite to say. Who wants to say that about their own child? And so it made me think, like, I said to her, I said, well, it would be a conversation. Like, if it meant having a relationship with you and Dad, then I would stop doing it. But, like, is that what you guys would want? Because I'm not coming back to the religion. So if it's going to be a relationship built on you trying to convince me to come back, that's not I'm not going to give up what I'm doing because of that. And so I've just been wrestling. I was wrestling with that for like the last 2 weeks or so. And so then I was questioning the fact that I ever did the channel at all, and everything I've done over the last 4 years, like with that thing specifically. And like, should I have ever done it? Should I like delete all this stuff? Is it worth it? And then I hear about the blood transfusion thing and the fact that people die for the religion, and that I was a kid who absolutely would have died for the religion. And I almost did. Like, I almost did more than once. And if butterfly effect, full circle, like if I had not started questioning that when I did, I would have died in the year 2021 when I had to go to the emergency room and I needed like blood transfusions to live. So that's why I think it's worth taking a stand against harmful beliefs, is because even though like I do find I like the idea of having an amazing relationship with my family, but I can't have a relationship based on a belief system like that. Right. Like I do feel like I have a responsibility to point it out. And I think even people who are more nihilistic, they're starting these YouTube channels. Why the hell are they doing that? I think it's because they think they have some ability to impact the way people think. If that's true, then we can make the world a better place. Like, the difference between us and every other animal is that we can imagine a better world, a different world. We have an understanding of the fact that we're going to die and that we don't necessarily get to choose out. Like, we have all of this agency in our own brains to imagine things that are better and to imagine different behaviors. So like, we should at least strive to do those things because it's what makes us different. So that's what I've been kind of wrestling with.
That was like literally head on kind of what one of the things I was hoping we would get into, which is one of the ideas that we have been floating around since we started and that we originally started talking about was the idea of passive apostasy, or soft apostasy, or something you might call it. This one's for Joel. If I had known, I would have told you, I've been there too, that the emptiness draining our wide open minds will eventually refill with time, verse, and whiskey. We would have toasted tragic greats who fought nobly for the arts and died fine, which would be among many stupid virtues we would sign. We would have dusted off Ulysses, found a Yeats line to unwind, while sipping Jameson with raised pinkies and grins. Or would it have been the insecurity of gin? We would have traded beams, borrowed wit split into laughter. I would have said I, and I, with a few me's for good measure. And we wouldn't have heard you at all, as you hid from both of us behind our innocent gall. The rising sun would have stretched over the opines, two distant gray clouds for two hazy minds. And we would have agreed to never trade nights like this. The numbered nights of possibility, the fleeting nights of curiosity, the dark nights of inevitability for all the wonderment in Xanadu. The nights that make life worth living. And for the first time all night, we would have been right. kind of the idea of what you just said about your uncle is the idea that maybe the best form, I don't want to say best. I think, first of all, what you have done has been very helpful to a lot of people. So I don't want you to think that it was necessarily a waste.
No,
but
yeah.
maybe
And I know
also now weighing like, yeah, but there is this like cost to it, right? Like you're a public apostate now. Your face is out there.
Yeah, true.
You've got videos all over online, right? Like you are more actively like, targeting the organization for better and worse, right? And
Altworldly is an XW
that comes with
name. I'll let you know.
Yeah, exactly. Totally.
We're in the top 10. We're in the top 10 niche XJW YouTube channels.
But there is I think you're feeling the cost probably of some of that too. And maybe for in some people's like situations, the most effective form of apostasy for their situation, if they really want to help their family, because I think this is all a desire we all have, right? Like you leave and you're, some people get very bitter, and that can manifest itself as sort of attacks and things like that. And that's not, typically very healthy. I think you probably would agree too.
Yes.
There's a lot of stuff that gets pretty out of control. Right. And is definitely going to, turn people off. No faster way to get even a witness like family member to shut you off than to get really aggressively attacking their beliefs. Right. And so in some cases, I think maybe the best thing you can do is just live a good life. Like just leave and live a good life. Be a good person. Like be your uncle. Like when somebody hears about you, have them hear that you're doing great.
Yes.
And
that I
in some ways
totally agree.
Yeah. Like in some ways it's passive in the sense that you're not like actively like emailing, the latest broadcast, critique video that you prefer to a family member. But there's a lot of power there. And I will say, just to like throw this out there, it's worked in my case. My parents are out now.
That's amazing.
And yeah, my dad was an HLC elder. Like I said, I'm a long time witness. My mom was a long time pioneer. There was a big CSA scandal in my hometown that really shook their faith, and I had already left at that point. And just the fact that I hadn't ever pushed them on anything. Mm-hmm. I really made it clear to them very early on. I told them some of my issues, but like, we basically just had an agreement, kind of like what you were just describing with your mom. But they were okay with like keeping a relationship with me as long as I didn't, bring anything up or whatever. And I was fine with that. Yeah. And I respected their wishes. And so then when the scandal broke, I was almost like a safety valve. Yeah. In some sense, right? Like they couldn't really talk about how they were really, and actually when they did try to talk about how they were really feeling to some of their really, really close friends, they got, a lot of pushback. Because they were having serious doubts, and my mom had dealt with abuse as a child, and so this really hit hard for her. And I mean, to the point that my dad even when he was kind of going through his questioning process, like one of his great longtime elder friends like kicked him out of his house. Like he wouldn't even tolerate hearing some critique of the way the organization had handled things, and that was it. That was the emotional kind of like linchpin for them that like rugged their faith. And then, then I was there when they came to me to say, yeah, well, check out the Australia CSA stuff. I had the whole list for them, and then, pretty quickly you're out. Yeah. And so I'm not setting this up as a way to say like, that's the better form of apostasy or anything like that. I just think that, there's different ways of going about doing this. And I think maybe that's something that is helpful for a lot of XJWs to think about too, once they leave, is like, maybe pumping the brakes on your vitriol toward your organization, if that's how you're feeling, or even just your passion to try to get your family out, and just try to focus on like being healthy and happy. Yes. And yes. Yeah. Like live a good life, because ultimately you need to do that anyways, or you're going to be miserable. And then you're going to add to the mythos of the apostate, right? That when people leave, I think this is kind of one of the things that inspired this in me. early on when I first woke up, I really didn't want to start like make trouble, I guess. But I had one friend that just would not drop it with you. Like he could sense that something was up, and he just kept at it with me.
Yep.
And I kept trying to deflect. He just wouldn't let it go. And so eventually we just had a big drop down, like fight over it, over everything. And, he ended that conversation telling me he would never talk to me again. And that within a year I was going to be disfellowshipped. I was going to be on drugs. He's like, I've seen it a million times. This is how it always goes, it's like this kind of thing. And that almost made in my own way, that was like what I needed to be like, oh no, it's not going to go that way. Like I'm still happily married. I smoke some weed once in a while, whatever. Like I'm not on drugs. I'm not a drug addict. My life is not. And actually, yeah, weed's been kind of a good addition to my life, I feel like.
Yeah, absolutely.
And like and I feel like now that my parents are out, my sister, it seems like, is kind of weakening. It sounds like I think they might be in their own kind of waking up process. But again, it's like something I'm like trying to walk this line. Like I don't want to push it. I don't want to. And my parents are kind of, I think, following in that same footsteps. I don't think my parents have even told her that they're out. They're just not going to meetings anymore, really. So
that's interesting.
Yeah, it's just kind of, I just wanted to throw that out there is just because in my experience, this actually did help. And like the fact that my parents were able to wake up, like these are the last people on earth, dude, that I would like could have ever imagined leaving. Although once they did, like you were saying, now I see that a lot of my doubts came from my dad. He was the one planting a lot of the stuff in my head about problems with the organization from stuff he had seen as a kid, as a teenager. And
I relate to that a lot, that you get it from your dad. Okay, so I have issues and agreements. I have disagreements and agreements. I do not agree with the characterization of is it passive versus active or aggressive?
Just maybe something like active, or just like the more kind of overt, like attacking of the beliefs or things like that.
I think. Let me try and formulate this. So,
and just to clarify, if that wasn't clear, I'm not against. I think all of that is great.
Oh no,
has a really important role. So like,
but you're wrong, and I'm going to tell you why. No, I'm just kidding.
No, it's fine.
No, God mode.
So like. I think I don't like passive because it is an active effort.
Like the word passive is that
I don't like that because it is an active effort really no matter what. Like, and even passive, like there's no way to leave the organization with dignity, right? Like not really. Probably what most of us would have preferred to do is to go to the elders and say, I think I love you guys, but I don't think that I really connect with this right now. I'm not going to be going to church anymore. And they'll be like, oh, we're going to miss you. Can we? Okay. All right. Well, you got to still come to the cookout. All right. That's seems to me how a normal religion would work, is it would obviously be a huge change to your life and your beliefs, but you would not be, angrily and summarily shunned by everyone, and with them under threat of being cast out of the movement if they had anything to do with you, right? So that's the problem. And as we know, there are people who just who try to do what you did, and it doesn't matter, because the mere fact that you have stopped going, that is offensive and scary, and that is enough of a stumbling block to get you labeled as an apostate.
No, yeah. So and actually, that's something I completely acknowledge, that like also that the risk you take of not being maybe more aggressive is not even the right word. Yeah, more like I don't know.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean,
like really going out of your way to try to find ways of like possibly shaking faith in people that you care about or whatever. Is that they may never actually wake up. That like if you could just kind of go live your good life, and like
here's
that never
my
really
take
works.
on that.
I don't know. But.
My take on that, the way that Lloyd Evans, my close personal friend, who I'm on good terms with, Lloyd Evans, the way that he would characterize this on his channel, I like, which was, I think he called, like, there was activism, and then he talked about aggressive activism, which would be people going up to literature cards confrontationally, not street epistemology, not asking questions to prompt critical thoughts, but you guys are protecting pedophiles. This is a call. Hey, everyone, these people do blah, blah, blah. Like that, causing a scene, whether it's in front of to belittle and make the Jehovah's Witness members, who, for all you know, is my grandma, scared and feel like shit. That is aggressive activism. And the thing that is the worst, in my opinion, is the Kingdom Hall crashing. I do not like that at all, even as an atheist. I think it is just insanely disrespectful to go into a place where you were not invited, where there is a ceremony being held, and to make them feel unsafe by screaming and shouting, because that's just, as you said, that is going to make the shutters go down. It conforms to every stereotype. Like what Watchtower is preparing Jehovah's Witnesses for is the person who goes into the Kingdom Hall and yells at them. Like that is what Watchtower wants apostates to look like, because it is not cool. It's going to be scary for parents who are worried that there's some psycho who's going to start, shooting people. It doesn't matter what facts you're.
And honestly, a lot of those people are psycho. Like,
yeah,
there are a lot.
Okay,
there are a lot of very deranged people that happen to have been witnesses at some point.
Yeah. Like we literally all know people at the Kingdom Hall who there wasn't a 0% chance that they wouldn't get up and start screaming crazy things. Like there's a person, like if they had a meltdown at the Kingdom Hall, you wouldn't have been totally shocked. It would have been a Joe Biden dying in his sleep situation that we talked about earlier. It's called a callback. This is a pro move we do on when you've done 200 podcasts. But here's the other thing I think about, right? I'm a pretty calm and collected character on the channel, generally speaking, what I want to be. Like I can kind of break down doctrines in a way that's not yelling, or that doesn't come across as like angry, I guess, to people. But it does to some. But like you said earlier, the common feedback I get is that people find it not triggering, which is my favorite thing that I hear. And but that skill set just evaporated when dealing with my parents, who held me in their hands as a baby and who I have lifelong relationships with. I was screaming and crying at my parents, and I, just betrayed. And how could you do this to me? Like I did every awful thing that I knew not to do because I had watched XJW content, and I knew that the worst thing to do was everything that I was doing, but I just couldn't control it because it's the most emotional experience I've ever gone through, is saying true things to your parents because you want them to just believe you, and just hearing nothing and hearing, no, you're cut out of the film. You cannot help how you're going to react to that situation. There's no strategy that you can really have, or you can have it, but it's just probably not going to work. But but I did not ever try and send them a bunch of apostate stuff. I never sent them like my videos, God forbid, or things like the Australian Royal Commission, because I totally agree that trying to out Jehovah's Witness your Jehovah's Witness parents and preach at them, to like, they're immune to that. That's what they've spent their whole lives doing. You're not going to out preach the Jehovah's Witness. They literally have a response to that stuff, like whatever. So I told them that I love them and that I do not believe in shunning. I hope that they one day feel comfortable researching these things, but I'm never going to shove this stuff down their throats. So I am okay with just having a relationship, right? So that was always there for me. over time.
Now, are you talking about like when you first left?
First left.
Okay, so this is when you
first left.
Okay, yeah.
Over time, those wounds have healed. And, you know, like I was able to have nice interactions with my dad and just be there for him. And I don't think it was that different than how it would have been if I was a witness and Grandpa died. I don't think his mood would have been that much different that day. You know what I'm saying? And I don't think that my demeanor would have been that much different. It was normal for a little bit. And they were able to, and the most amazing thing is, listeners won't know that I'm freshly shaved and got a haircut, and I look exactly like me as a Jehovah's Witness right now. I walk in there and everybody is disheveled and has beards because
that's right. Yeah.
For perfectly valid reasons, because first of all, there was never anything wrong with beards to begin with. And second of all, because, you know, they're just tired and have been not sleeping and at the hospital and stuff. But I came in there with kind of fond memories of my grandfather, getting the conversation started. I was dressed in nice clothes and looked like a Jehovah's Witness. I'm married to the same woman I was with, which is not the case with everybody in my family. I am not the only person to have been disfellowshipped in the interim. There have been people that have been reinstated for like sexual sins, and they have been welcomed back into the family and don't want to talk to me. Like, they're not the family that feels comfortable. So here's the point of all that is, like, I don't think it matters what you do when you leave. In terms of, like, I absolutely agree that you should not hound your parents or your spouse with apostate stuff, because you cannot change people's minds for them. But I also think that it is not fair to give them the power of silencing you where your parents don't have to hear it. Like, I don't make videos and like project them into my parents' bedrooms so they like have to listen to their son screaming apostate stuff and making fart sounds behind the governing body. Like, that is a totally,
I mean, we could try it.
I truly sincerely believe that if my parents ever wake up,
nothing else is working.
If my parents ever wake up and they watch my YouTube channel, they will find it very funny and they will like it. Like, because they gave me my sense of humor.
My parents won't listen to the podcast. I don't get it.
Well, there's also that option, because I have also woken up a couple members of my family, an aunt and uncle. They do not watch my channel. They don't watch the channel.
Yeah, it's just. I almost wonder if it's like a guilt thing in my parents' case. Like,
that's very possible.
I really think they're holding a lot of guilt.
They worry that you're going to
raise us in it.
They worry that you're talking about them. That's the thing that I know that you're just listening to me talk about processing my last week of trauma under the slight veil of like a theme that you set out. But I appreciate you giving me this venue.
Well, I just appreciate you being on, like, even this soon after. So thank you for that. That's very gracious of you anyway.
Oh man, I've needed to talk about it. And here's what I've been doing, right? Is I've just been journaling and I've just been writing. I haven't been working on any projects. I just have been writing journal entries just for me, and like kind of writing what's the obituary that I would write for my grandfather that he and anybody in my family could read and not think for a second that this was written by an apostate, you know? Because that's kind of, honestly, like, that, there's a part of me that really feels like that just loves my grandpa and has no ill will. There's another part that's, you know, like, sad on a grander scale, that that he lived his whole life and he was never supposed to get old, and that he might have done things differently if he knew that paradise was not going to come in his lifetime. Like, if you had told him that when he was 15, he might not have done, maybe not 15, because then I wouldn't be here. He should have been in that cult for a little bit.
Yeah, my grandpa, who was a longtime elder, he was a congregation servant. That's how far back he goes, at like 26 or something like that. He gave up a pro baseball career to be a witness.
Yeah, so
things like that are just, it's sad.
So I was talking to my aunt who is left. Then she's on my mom's side of the family. So she's not as close with, well, she's not close at all with my paternal grandfather, but knows all the family lore. Heard that. So my maternal grandfather calls my aunt to give her the news that my grandpa Briggs had died. And my grandpa Tom, my mom says, this wasn't supposed to happen. Like this wasn't supposed to happen. We weren't supposed to get old. This is the devout Jehovah's Witness, right? And that's what he said. And so we started talking about Grandpa Tom and Grandma Rose on my mom's side of the family. And I said, I don't find their conversion story, and I never found their conversion story very inspiring, to be quite honest, because as somebody who was like very consciously giving up creative aspirations to be a Jehovah's Witness, my grandparents' conversion story on my mom's side is that my grandfather played slide guitar in a rock and roll band, and they would play clubs in New York, and he was awesome. And my grandmother was a nurse, and he would come to his shows and met him there, and they got married and were just like cool people, where he was a rock and roll slide guitarist, which is awesome. They converted to Jehovah's Witnesses because of the 1975 teaching. I've been able to piece together, like, that's the book that brought them in.
A very important mentor to me was exactly this. He was a very talented musician,
right?
Who came in because of 1975.
They would never mention that. They would absolutely repeat the thing that some people blew that out of the proportion. Do you think if we were going around when we were preaching, if we were telling people that the earth was going to end in the year 2007, like, we would have had a better success rate? It's just that would have entered people's equations. Like,
people, you can get an online cult going just off of some like Mayan calendar, like random, like interpretations.
Stay tuned for future written content from the author of Altworldly. What am I saying? I have a story I'm working on along similar lines. But, when they got married and became Jehovah's Witness, and he became an elder, I never, ever in my entire life saw my grandfather play the guitar. He did not own a guitar. He would not talk about it unless he was talking about wistful memories of meeting my grandmother. Saw him light up, happier than I've ever seen him talk about anything, talking about that stuff. And it's because when he would play guitar, it made him sad about the life that he missed out on. That alternate timeline he could have lived in. That's so depressing. That's so sad. I think my grandfather on my dad's side had a much more like fulfilled sense of self. He didn't seem to have any hobbies he was consciously avoiding to avoid depression. But I think that's like another thing to keep in mind when you're leaving the Jehovah's Witnesses. Like, you have freedom for the first time in your life. You didn't own a guitar on purpose because you were worried that you would be swept up by rock and roll, like it was "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou" or something. Like the devil would like try and tempt you away from Jehovah's organization. And now you have all this freedom, and you're gonna like make mistakes with it. You're gonna like start an aggressive Twitter account and go ham on Jehovah's Witnesses all day, every day, and then realize that maybe this is not the way. Maybe I don't need to be doing that all the time. Let me try doing this over here. Like, you're going to try on a lot of different personalities and try a lot of different things because there's a lot of things that like you gave up. So like a certain amount of bitterness is also perfectly understandable.
Yeah, I know, I totally agree with everything you said, really. And I think that's an interesting point you just said about you sort of are trying on almost like different personalities or something, because you don't really know kind of in a lot. It's some kinds it's different. Like there are some witnesses who come in like as adults or later, and like they sort of remember kind of who they were, prior to being in the cult.
Very
or something.
different.
It is different when you're raised in it. We don't really, have a sense of like identity outside of that organization,
Yes.
that group. And so you don't know like what, if I had, I mean, in my case, like I went to college, but when I was in college, I was still a witness. So like, I don't know, had I gone to college and had the freedom to like explore different ideas, date different people, I have no idea what what kind of path I would have taken, like who I would have become.
Absolutely.
And there's like this sense when you leave, I think you want to almost like maybe in some small way, and however you can in the confines of your current context in your life, like maybe go, like explore some of those things. And I think all like that can also be really healthy. I don't think necessarily it's all
no, absolutely,
bad or anything like that. Like even taking out some anger on the organization. Like I went down that path too. And like, I am not
I do it all the time
in any way against that, like in theory. Or in principle.
So let me get, I remember how I like bragged about taking notes and then I forgot to reference them at all because I just started rambling about trauma. Okay, I just want to go through these because I know I feel really bad because I feel like the logo has not been able to get a single word in edgewise. I'm so sorry.
I'm sorry, logo.
But I wrote down the win them over without a word strategy. So like I think what you're kind of implying is a strategy where you're not being an outward apostate. So like, I think that's the win them over without a word strategy. And I think the problem with it is like what you said later, which is that you need to kind of do that anyway. Like you need to do the thing where you are living well and demonstrating that happiness can exist outside the religion. Like you need to do that no matter what you're doing. I think the people who go totally insane and really lose themselves are people who make their whole personality, I'm going to be a Kingdom Hall crasher. And that is like the only thing they're doing. Now, because YouTube, quite frankly, I'm not to, throw stones in a glass house, but it is just quite frankly a different venue. It is optional. It's like people can take it or leave it. No one's forced to watch the videos, right? Whereas people are forced to listen to whatever you're screaming at them in a building. So I think like it is, for me, it is a mixture of living well is the best revenge. And you have to be true to what your dreams were. Like for me, I wanted to do YouTube because I wanted very vainly to be famous because I always did since I was a little kid. And so I honestly, it was like, I feel like I always want to be a YouTuber and I think I could be good at it. And now I have something to talk about. And I want to have some kind of presence on the internet. I'm going to do this. And that's totally vain and self-serving. And I've just had to make my peace with that. I think it just is. And I am just like, you know what? I like it. It keeps me alive. And I enjoy doing it. And it seems to provide some kind of value for other people. And, you just have to do what is true to you. You cannot live your life for other people because you could just live your life not doing YouTube, which is what, by the way, 99% of all human beings who've ever lived do. And they're perfectly happy not doing YouTube. But if your dream is to do YouTube, then you should do it because, it would be sad if you gave up playing rock and roll to appease your parents who are going to shun you anyway. You know what I'm saying? So like, if you cannot change your mind, just do what feels true to you. It might not even be right. You might fuck it up like 90 times because you're now a 14-year-old child let loose into the world in a 50-year-old man's body or like wherever you are in your stage leaving the organization. So I think people shouldn't worry too much about gaming it out. I think people should just you just got to do what you got to do to survive and you assess the damage later. But the most important thing is getting out and getting yourself healthy.
I always find it fascinating because I've had and we've talked about this in previous episodes, but I've had a very distinct experience in quotes as an XJW. I don't even know if that term fits. I don't even relate to that term in a lot of cases.
Sure, yeah.
But I always find it interesting.
Former Watchtower associate.
There you go.
You can call it whatever you want.
Occasional meeting attender.
Yeah. I was a seat filler for quite some time.
Occasional door knocker. No.
A 6 hour a month publisher.
it's funny. I always fudge those numbers. I think
never once were the numbers correct. Never.
No. I think that
God knew I lied every field service report my entire life, and that's why the Holy Spirit never once penetrated.
I literally watched Event Horizon one time in service and counted my time for it.
When I gained the ability to like be a pioneer who could technically count service time while simply driving near a bus station in a suit and listening to a podcast I would have listened to anyway, the world was my oyster. Except no, it wasn't, because why was I doing that like a creepy stalker instead of being a normal 23-year-old young man? Like, I could have been having sexual relations with humans instead of sitting in a van with magazines about Paradise Logo. I'm going to let you talk.
No, you're fine. No, I mean, the whole... even like trying to like convert because I think we've all had like bouts of this, like even the whole idea of even talking to your classmates about the doctrine, feeling triumphant, trying to like make them somehow make them JWs. It's like even the idea or the concept of that seems so like, man, what was I on?
Let me tell you a little secret about the YouTube channel in terms of managing your own triggeredness, because that's like I've had people say like, I can't believe you engage.
Secret, like this is off the record or on the record?
I think I will allow you to publish this and once I consult with my legal team, which is vast and exists in Croatia. They here's why I'm so sorry. For no reason. I am resurrecting the drama. Here's what you do. You put this as bonus clips at the end. No one will watch that far. Okay. You've seen the analytics. They will not. 98% of the audience turns off within 30 seconds, and then your 3 subscribers who actually like you watch all the way to the end. And message you personally to make jokes about the video. That's what I like, by the way. But people I've asked like how I engage with triggering content. And I think the reality is I do not engage with the content that I personally find triggering. The things that I find triggering are what you just said, which is telling classmates Jehovah's Witness stuff. That is a thing I have a really hard time thinking about. That's so hard to think about. Like, I really avoid thinking about being out in service and conversations that we would have glazing ourselves up about how right we were and just how wrong people, like, those are the things that I'm like
cringe,
because I was the middle schooler who didn't sleep through all of middle school because every night was spent like I was recapping conversations that I had and like, here's 10 things you could have said instead of that, idiot. Like what she's thinking about this weird, awkward way my voice, like, you know, you're analyzing everything. So I have that spiraling personality, and that is the stuff that I would absolutely bum myself out about if I think like, oh my God, I remember this night in the Spanish congregation when I had a Bible study and I so desperately didn't want to do it because I barely spoke Spanish and my Bible study only spoke Spanish. And I just had looked at pornography at home, and I was definitely not supposed to do that as a ministerial servant conducting Bible studies. And I drove, you know, from the scene of the crime to the Bible study.
And then you don't know, do I have to talk to the elders, or is it like if I don't do it for like the next month?
Yes.
Have I not like developed a pattern?
Is the mere fact
maybe I don't? Yeah, and
is the mere fact that I did not die in a car crash on the way to this Bible study proof that Jehovah has convened upon me permission to view pornography?
Right.
Yeah. So those are that's the stuff. And here's the resolution of that story. I sat in the parking lot and realized that I just didn't have it in me to conduct this Bible study. And I called them and told them that I was sick and couldn't make it, even though I was there. And then I turned around and went to the shopping mall and bought video games from GameStop and drank whiskey by myself. That's a new memory. I haven't thought about, well, I do. I think about sitting in that parking lot a lot that is a stress memory. Is the parking lot on kind of sitting in these apartments sitting off of Bethel Road near the Joanne Fabrics.
Bethel
that was
Road,
there.
Man. That just triggered in me a memory.
It was called Bethel Road. I didn't even think about that, but yeah, the Bethel Road. No relation.
Yeah. The first year I was baptized, I got baptized at 16, so I was 17.
Late bloomer.
Go out. I meet some people at a concert. I think it was like Union Underground or one of those terrible like rock bands from like early aughts. And I only saw concerts of terrible bands from the early aughts. So some friend of ours meets up with us, and we find out later that he had beer, which we were under 21, so like that was like, how'd you get beer, whatever, kind of not explained.
Now you're in a young people ask article.
I didn't drink it all. Yeah, I drank it all. So we just do that. Or maybe I had a little. I don't remember, but we do the little rock concert thing. Anyway, it turns out the kid stole some beer from a 7-Eleven, and was with this girl. She was a witness too, and I don't think anything sexual happened. But the kid had such a guilty conscience over it, he turns himself in. So we all get dragged in because we were all at this concert. Yeah, see, like Logo just completely doesn't even understand like the idea of turning yourself into the. Like, I mean, I got multiple people disfellowship because of stuff I couldn't live with. I took out. Like,
I've never heard that
people,
admission before. That's amazing.
Yeah, just wiped him out.
I was a snitch. I was a professional, essentially a prison snitch.
Mm-hmm. Well, it was like a situation where like I had like, in order to tell people what I like to tell the elders what I did, I had to include other people, right?
Oh.
Anyway, yeah. So but that's what happened to me this time. So this kid like turns himself in. 5 of us get pulled in, and they like basically just like sort of had decided already that they were doing a judicial committee, and I literally hadn't done anything wrong. I mean, like I was at the concert, and then so they were probing the whole like time to really like try to find something to reprove me on, because
it's a war tribunal.
They had got it in their head that we were like, yeah, we were a group of like kids that were like on the wrong path or whatever, and they were gonna find something. Like there was gonna be something that they could dig up. They end up reproving me for swearing, because I tell them at some point in this conversation that when they asked me something about, because I think they said something about the language in the concert or something like that. Because I think this kid I think the kid that turned us in was trying to get us like all like, I think he wanted like a group reproval here, like so we wouldn't feel so isolated or something. I don't know.
This is a RICO case. We can try them as one.
Yeah, exactly. Something like that. So anyway, this is going longer than I was expecting, but like they start probing me on like, well, is that the kind of language that you like typically like listen to in your music and stuff, and like do you use that kind of language? And so I, being the honest like 17-year-old like good kid that I was like, yeah, well, you know, like not really, but like I mean, I remember like my best friend and I, when we were like 15, we used to just have like cuss-a-thons every once in a while, where we were like, well, we can't cuss, so we're just gonna like have a once a month, we just get to like, we can cuss for an afternoon or something like that. They reproved me for that. And
oh, you lived my nightmare. You lived my nightmare.
We had the funniest thing. It actually like almost caused like laughter in the hall. We called it the round robin of reproof, because at that point, every person had to have a different. You had to have a different like head of your committee. And so because there were 5 of us, each one of us had a different head of our committee, and each one of those people had to announce the reproof. They couldn't just say like so and 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 so are approved.
Wow.
They had to like take turns each, because like I have no I don't even know that this is like
affair, just a procession of terrible announcements. They're all the same, different people. So for the listener,
and I think mine was last. And I remember my dad actually literally cracking a smile, like while this is going.
So you just so
this is kind of one of those little
understanding. You were saying that there's essentially a line of 5 elders with a small sheet of paper in hand, and after
so one would go up and announce it, and then he was rotating down, the next elder would come up.
And it was so clear to everyone after the second one that it was all gonna be the same. There wasn't any chance that the third one was like, also we're having that memorial service Sorry for the false alarm.
Yeah, no.
That's
and this was during the announcement part, because like they were still doing it in the middle of the meetings.
That's
at that point,
a tough one. I did not.
Yeah,
is that what they did? Oh, I thought they still
they used
did
to do
it
at the end of the announcements, and then so sometimes there would be these like really devastating disfellowshippings.
Yeah,
and people would be like, literally like bawling in the audience and stuff, and the meeting would just continue. Like you had 2 more parts.
Holy shit! No, you're right. You're right.
Absolute psychotic.
That's fucking crazy.
Stuff.
I forgot about that because the change was so wise. I remember actively contemplating and hearing elders tittering about, which is that it's so much more.
The governing body is so loving,
so dignified. To have the announcements be at the end of the meeting, so that if it ends on a disfellowshipping announcement, you end with a song, so everyone is uplifted and has had 0 seconds to process the disfellowshipping.
Or you can cry through the song so nobody hears all the like sniffles.
That's right.
And
everyone stand, and so that everyone can get a quick peek at who runs to the back to cry. So you can like, okay, they were aware of the situation or were close to the deceased. Good shit. Logo, did that answer your question?
Yeah.
I was gonna say, I think you guys have like the way cooler stories. I never had.
Oh no!
I'm like,
I don't have that many cool stories, honestly, because I was a good witness who only ever lived in fear of the elders learning about my cussathons, among other things. Like, there were so many things that I absolutely could have been part of round robin approvals for that are minor JW crimes. It was not drinking alcohol or partying, but cussathons and, homoerotic shenanigans, maybe.
Yeah, I never forget the elder. He was like trying to explain to me why this was like a disfellowshipping offense. He was like, "Would you wear a tie to the meeting that had the F word?" Like this is.
That's as good as the analogies I made up off the top of my head in this podcast.
Yeah, checkmate.
I love that. Their only tool. I've kind of figured this out on a recent stream or diary entry. It's hard to keep track of what I'm doing these days, but I was thinking about the fact that there are only so many correct answers. Like, there's a correct answer to every question in the group. There's a truth, and then there's the wrong thing that you might be mistaken about, but there's a right answer. And so you can't reason your way to a different conclusion. You can only find new analogies to try and justify the conclusion. So the analogy, the illustration is really their only tool and that's why every single talk focuses on illustration, is because you're only ever repackaging the same information over and over again. That's the whole ballgame. I wish the viewers could see, or the listeners could see, the incredible thing that's happened, which is, despite us all sitting still, we have grown visibly more disheveled over the course of 2 hours and 30 minutes.
Yeah, my hair is just fluffed up. Yep.
No, it's amazing. I just looked at my camera and was like, I look more tired. I feel the same amount of energy, but I look like I'm sad and tired. But I'm not. I feel great. Thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Oh, yeah.